Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economic. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Today I brought for you all 2281 and 0455 topic 3.7, which is titled as Firms, Costs, Revenues and Objectives. Under this topic, we'll be looking at what happens to total costs and revenue as a firm changes its output level, what motivates a firm, can they always achieve the desirable level of profitability, and eventually what are the different objectives of firms. So let's quickly look into what the topic is all about. There'll be a couple of definitions we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the diagrams. We'll be looking at how to calculate these different costs. And finally, we'll be looking at the different objectives of firms. The first definition we come across is referred to as total cost. Total cost is basically the composition of fixed cost and variable cost. Now, what do we mean by fixed cost? What do we mean by variable cost? This we'll be looking in a little while. For the time being, total cost encapsulates or refers to the total amount that has to be spent on the factors of production used to produce a product. So, if you want to make a product, whatever amount you are spending on those four factors of production, which are essential for the manufacturing of the product, all those costs would be termed as or fall under total cost. As the level of output increases, so would the total cost. So the higher the output, the higher would be the total cost. Average total cost, how would we calculate that? When we divide the total cost by the level of output. Average total cost is also referred to as average cost or unit cost. So if I say unit cost or if I say average cost, it means average total cost. Fixed cost. These are also referred to as overheads or indirect costs. These are costs which do not change with the level of output in the short run. This means that even though the firm might be altering its output level, might be increasing its level of output, however, these costs would remain the same. For example, rent or interest on loans. Now, what do we mean by fixed? By the term fixed, we mean that they have to be paid even when the output level is zero. This means that even though the firm might not have started its level of operations, but there's certain costs that have to be paid even when the output level is zero. The firm has not even started its production activity, or maybe the firm is closed due to certain national holidays, perhaps, but it needs to pay for its security, right? So these are the costs that have to be paid even when there's no operations or no production taking place. That is why, if you look at the diagram, total fixed cost is a straight line parallel to the x-axis. It shows that the level is fixed. Whatever happens to the level of output, nothing would change in the short run to the fixed cost. It's a straight line. This means the cost will remain the same no matter whatever happens to the output level. Average fixed cost, how would we calculate that? When we divide the total fixed cost by the level of output. Now, what happens to average fixed cost? As the level of output rises, the average fixed cost begins to fall because the fixed cost was fixed. So, with the increase in output level, the per unit fixed cost falls. That is why it's a downward sloping curve. Variable costs. Now, these are costs which are contrary to fixed costs. These are also referred to as direct costs. These are the costs that vary directly with the level of output and they change with the level of output, for instance, salaries, electricity charges, or raw materials. So, as the level of output increases, so does the variable cost. This means that the higher the level of output, the higher the level of variable cost. Now, initially they rise slowly, as the diagram is showing, because of productivity, and then they quickly rise. average variable cost. How will we calculate this? When we divide the total variable cost by the level of output. In the short run, as the level of output increases, the average variable cost falls and then rise. This is shown by this upright parabola, this curve. What does it shows? That the vertical axis is displaying the cost and the horizontal axis is displaying the output level. So what happens that as the level of output kept on increasing, this was the point, let's say I will call it as X, where the firm achieves economies of scale because this is the point where the cost is minimum, the average variable cost is minimum. Beyond this point, the cost begins to rise. This means the firm achieves this economies of scale, right? So as the level of output increases, initially the average variable cost fall, and beyond point X, it starts to rise. Now we come to this diagram, which displays the composition of total cost. The dark blue line shows the fixed cost, which is parallel to the x-axis. It shows that the fixed costs are fixed. No matter whatever happens with the output level, it's a straight line. And the purple line is displaying the total cost. The difference between the total cost and the fixed cost is the variable cost. So this is the amount of fixed cost that has to be paid even when there was no production taking place. So total cost by equation can be broken down into total fixed cost and total variable cost. And the point to be noted over here is that in the long run, all costs will be termed as variable cost. There will be no fixed cost. Why? Because the firm has sufficient time to expand its production level, expand its scale of operations. So its rent and wages all would increase. Hence, all costs would be variable. So in the long run, this would be the total cost curve. If you look at the diagram above, the total cost was beginning from here, from the point where the fixed cost was there. But the second diagram shows that the total cost is beginning from zero. Why? Because all costs in the long run are variable. So they tend to change with the level of output. Average total cost is can be broken down into average fixed cost and average variable cost, or it's the sum of average fixed cost and average variable cost. The shape of both the short run and the long run average cost curve is U-shaped. Initially, the cost will fall because of economies of scale, and later again they rise because of diseconomies of scale. The point to be noted over here is that by definition, long run is a time period when all the factors of production can be changed and all the costs incurred by a firm are termed as variable. Alright, I hope this part of the topic was clear. The next part of this topic is revenue. What is revenue? Price into quantity. This is how we calculate, or by definition, revenue refers to the money firms receive by selling their product. This is also referred as revenue. Price, how would you define price? The amount of money that has to be given to obtain a product. So if you want to buy something, you need to pay its price. So if I ask you to define price, you would say it's the amount of money that has to be given to obtain a product. So total revenue is the total amount of money firms receive by selling their products, right? And how would we calculate average revenue? When we divide total revenue by the quantity sold. Or average revenue could also be referred to as price. Now, these are the two curves, one which are to be found under the situation of perfectly competitive firm, This is the first is displaying the average revenue, and the second diagram is displaying the total revenue. Now, average revenue is constant, whereas the total revenue is rising. Why is the average revenue constant? Because under a firm which is operating under situation of perfect competition, they are price deceivers, right? They are price takers. They have little or no influence on price in a competitive market. So average revenue would be constant. Total revenue would rise as the revenue rises. On the contrary, this is a monopoly situation where the average revenue would fall as quantity sold, because under monopoly they are price makers, right? And if you look at the curve, the second diagram shows the total revenue situation. It shows that yes, there is a sharp increase in the total revenue level, and the total revenue rises. It reaches its max, its peak, and then it starts to fall. All right. This is the third component of this topic. Broadly speaking, there are four objectives of firms: survival, growth, profit maximization, or social welfare, or profit satisficing. What do you mean by survival? This is basically the initial objective of any firm which enters into a market. That means it just wants to cover its costs. Or even it has been observed in certain situations where there are severe economic downturns. So a firm just tries to survive. For instance, under COVID-19, the prime objective of firms were, or businesses were, to survive or be able to cover their costs. The second objective of firms could be growth. That means they want to increase their size, they want to expand their level of operations, they want to do this by experiencing economies of scale. And why would a firm go for growth? Because it's incentivized to achieve economies of scale, because this would lead towards lower average cost of production. And when the firm grows its size, it's better being able to achieve loans from banks on favorable terms. So it gets to be able to raise finance on more negotiable terms. Then managers or people who operate or who are running firms, they are able to get better job security, and they rise in their ranks. So increases the size of the firm is in their favor as well. And similarly, when firms grow in size, they are able to better get quotations for the raw materials. They are better on terms to negotiate. And how can firms achieve this growth is through mergers, acquisitions, and when they do this, they are able to wipe off their competitors because they grow into one big giant, or they are able to dominate the market. So they increase their market share as well. Profit satisficing is when firms sacrifice some of their profitability to achieve other goals. Now, it could be social welfare, or it could be firms ensuring sizable dividends to keep shareholders contented, or maybe they are sacrificing their profits to increase staff welfare, or buy sustainable raw material in order to incorporate CSR, corporate social responsibility, right? Environmental friendly methods. Profit maximization is another objective of firms. This is when firms seek to earn maximum profit, and Some objectives like increasing growth or profit satisficing or increasing social welfare might conflict with profit maximization, because once the firms aim to expand social welfare, so this means they are sacrificing the profit. Or when they are trying to achieve welfare for employees, they are sacrificing a part of their profit. But in the long run, you would observe that these sacrifices would eventually enable the firm to earn even larger profits, again sizable profits. So total profit, how is can you break it down? It's the difference between the total revenue and the total cost. So higher the difference between the revenue and the cost is, the higher the gap is, the higher the profitability would be. So per unit profit can be achieved by subtracting average revenue, average cost from average revenue. It's the difference between average revenue and average cost. So maximum profit is when the gap between the revenues and the cost is the greatest. Now, why does profitability matters? Profitability matters because profitability provides incentives to entrepreneurs to expand their production or encourage more firms to enter market. It would entice more firms to enter. And again, higher the profitability, higher would be your chances to negotiate easy finance or negotiate finance, get able to obtain loans on your terms. Again, it's easier for firms to attract and retain staff when higher the level of profitability is, because you will be able to give handsome wages or overtime wages and bonuses and perks to your staff. And when firms experience profitability, so shareholders, they're enticed to buy shares of your firms, so people are likely to invest and in your firm, and it shareholders trust firms which experience high levels of profitability. So you are able to gain trust of your shareholders. So the question which arises now is, how can a firm then increase or maybe improve the profitability level? So broadly speaking, there are two ways. Either you cut down on your costs or you try to find ways to increase your revenue. So the first aspect is, how would a firm try to chop or cut down on its cost? It can do that by reducing its wastage or improving its efficiency level. It can go for mergers and takeovers. This way, it will be able to wipe off its competitors and achieve economies of scale, where the average cost of production would fall and the firm would be experiencing an handsome increase in its market share. And another way is the firm can train its workers. Wow, and it can replace its obsolete machinery with high technology, right? So what would it enable it to do is that the productivity level would rise, and hence when the productivity would increase, the output per unit would rise, so the average cost per unit would fall, or the average cost of production would fall, hence the firm would experience economies of scale. So this is how it would be able to cut down on its costs. So the question, the second aspect, which was that the firm can also raise its revenue, it can improve on its quality by employing better production methods, by responding to changing consumer preferences and seeking surveys and looking at closely what the consumers are demanding and providing with the goods and services according to their preferences and their demand. Firms can also play with prices, and they can do that by taking a close look at the elasticity of the product. So if a firm's product has inelastic demand, it can charge higher prices and be able to achieve higher revenues and widen the gap between the cost and revenue and achieve sizable profit. Similarly, if a firm sees that its product has elastic demand, so a little fall in price would be able to get hold of a large increase in its demand, so the firm can have or experience higher revenue, and again it can widen the gap between the cost and revenue, and hence will be able to achieve higher profitability level. So a firm has to closely monitor its elasticity level and can alter its prices and achieve profits. Finally, it can go for successful advertising campaigns and highlight the positives it offers with its products and services in order to achieve higher profitability level. All right, so this was what this topic was all about. I hope you've understood. We'll be back with more such tutorials. Stay tuned, subscribe, share. Happy learning.